What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima is going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, his hand hovering over that telephone, ready to swoop down, answer the phone, and put you on the air with your comments and questions. So getting on into it, let's see what's going on. Let's see what those sphincters in Washington, D.C. are up to today. And big story, of course, is that one of Donald Trump's lawyers, in fact, the lead Trump lawyer defending him in this Russia probe, has basically resigned. John Dowd basically stepped down. He's left the legal team. And basically, it's a very polite political resignation, loves the president, wishes him well. The story I'm hearing is that Dowd had made several statements that he claimed represented the opinion of President Trump, in particular to the ending of the Mueller investigation, which Trump had not actually made. And that caused a little bit of friction. And so Dowd has now stepped on down. Now, Representative Gohmert is accusing Mueller of using the Russia witch hunt to distract everybody from the Uranium One scandal. And Gohmert is now calling for Mueller to be fired as well. And basically because Mueller was part of the group that authorized this leasing of U.S. uranium mining lands to Russia. 20% of our uranium is now going to Russia. And that was followed, of course, by the Environmental Protection Agency declaring other U.S. sources of uranium off limits, and the U.S. is having to import uranium. So that was the deal. Hillary Clinton and her associates, her co-conspirators, if you will, arranged for Russia to gain access to 20% of America's uranium. They're mining it, they're refining it, and then they get to sell it back to the United States. And so that is a huge, huge scandal. And they're basically trying to keep all the attention, media attention on Trump, because they're afraid the American people are going to find out just how dirty Hillary Clinton and her associates, including Robert Mueller, have actually been. And more about Mueller's dark past is starting to surface. We found out that he was in charge of that anthrax investigation that totally ignored a prime suspect, Philip Zach, who was caught on security systems going into the lab at U.S. Biological Weapons Laboratory, where that particular strain of anthrax was being kept. And instead, they focused on Stephen Hatfield, who was innocent, destroyed his life, focused on Bruce Ivins, who was totally innocent, drove him literally to suicide. And then, of course, we found out that Mueller was also basically in charge of, there's so much coming on out about it. And you begin to understand that in our current federal government, people willing to do the dirty work get the promotions. They get the money. So that's unfortunately the way it is. Now, Alan Dershowitz, and I don't always agree with everything he says, but this time I do. He's saying that basically Mueller is performing a legal colonoscopy, and he never should have been appointed. And Dershowitz is saying there is no probable cause of crimes committed by Trump, and thus no special counsel should have been appointed. And this is a point that we've brought up before. The normal procedure under the special counsel law is a normal Department of Justice investigation is conducted. And if they find evidence a crime has been committed of sufficient magnitude, then a special counsel is appointed. But Rosenstein simply went to Robert Mueller and said, get after Trump. Find anything you can. And Mueller has now been months long, millions of dollars in costs, and he's found absolutely nothing. Now, Mueller was hoping that he was going to be able to get something that would tarnish Trump with a witness, George Nader. And apparently he was going to be a key witness, but he's now left the country because it's been revealed he's a convicted pedophile. And he's flown back to the United Arab Emirates. And apparently he's been a paid advisor for the UAE. And he did have close ties to the Trump administration. But if Mueller wanted to use him as a witness, that option is now closed. Now, there's an interesting opinion article over at Breitbart where they're basically saying that limitless, endless investigations of Trump was always the plan, to keep him off balance, to keep him busy, to keep him from working on his agenda, or to keep him so distracted that he couldn't focus on draining the swamp and keeping some of his campaign promises. Mostly, I think it's about keeping Trump from keeping the promise about putting Hillary Clinton in jail, where she richly deserves to be. So they basically came up with this Russiagate story, and it's out of thin air. And they're constantly investigating. They're forcing Trump to spend money on defense lawyers, personal lawyers. And it is basically lawfare directed against the elected president of the United States of America. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And over at Judicial Watch, they have confirmed they have found at least 18 classified emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop. 18 classified emails in the 798 documents recently produced by the State Department from the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's illicit email system. Remember, the State Department says, it's going to take 70 years to get all this stuff processed. But Judicial Watch has gone to court saying you must respond in a more timely fashion. And so some of these emails are coming on out, and they found 18 of these classified emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop. That is a felony violation of Title 18, and intent is not required. Mr. Comey. Now, Judicial Watch is also suing for the pay-to-play allegations. And Judicial Watch is suing the U.S. Department of State for emails, calendar entries, all other information in the electronic file of Dennis Cheng, who was Deputy Chief of Protocol for 2 years under former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. They're having to sue because the State Department refused to respond to a Freedom of Information Act request. So right there you have evidence. There's a cover-up going on at the Department of Justice. They don't want the stuff to come on out. And Judicial Watch is having to go to court to get a judge to say, you must release this. All work product of all politicians, unless it is classified, is a public record, and the public is allowed to look at it. Now, the House Intelligence Committee has voted to formally end its Russia probe, saying they have found no evidence of any collusion between associates of President Trump and Russia. So that part of it is over. And of course, the Democrats are out there screaming, it's politics, it's a cover-up, it's all the Republicans' fault here. Mueller's going to hit pay dirt any day now, he's going to have that evidence. Now, James Comey may be in trouble. And he used to actually promote himself, present himself as the last honest man in Washington. Well, it turns out, no, he wasn't. He was a major player in the effort to undermine the elected president of the United States. And now he may be in a little trouble. When Comey testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee last June, he stated that he was never an anonymous source and he never authorized any leaks, and that has turned out to be a lie. Now, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe was fired for leaking to the press during the Clinton email investigation and then lying about it to investigators. And during that process, he defended himself with a statement claiming that Director Comey had been aware of his leaks to the press. So now Comey is caught out being an accessory to the leaks and lying about it to Senate investigators. Now, getting on back to this Stormy Daniels situation, it turns out her lawyer was also on the payroll of Joe Biden, Rahm Emanuel, and he's previously sued Trump and The Apprentice reality show. This guy has made a career of finding ways to go after Donald Trump. And the guy's name is Michael Avenatti, and he's working for these two Obama pals. And he worked on the political campaigns of over 150 Democrats, including national campaigns, when he wasn't busy suing Trump and the Apprentice producer Mark Bennett for alleged intellectual property infractions. So Avenatti has an anti-Trump grudge. That much is very, very obvious. And clearly, he's not thinking about what is the best interest of his client, Stormy Daniels. He's using her. He's using her to gin up another attack against Donald Trump. Now, I honestly don't approve of a man cheating on his wife or a wife cheating on the husband. And that's my rule. I understand about statistically half of spouses do cheat at some point in their lives. I question Trump's taste in the case of Stormy Daniels. But trying to make this into an issue to unseat the president, I think it's going to be rather futile, because that 50% of husbands and wives who do cheat are going to say, well, everybody does it. Now, getting on back to this strange story about Joe Biden and his son getting this massive deal with a Chinese company, which apparently is interested in America's nuclear secrets. Basically, it's uncovering a new way for foreign interests to have political kickbacks, with all the attention being paid to, for example, Hillary Clinton's pay-to-play. Foreign interests are no longer willing to offer bribes directly to the politicians. But what they're doing is they basically go after the children of high-level U.S. politicians, and they get them great business deals and all kinds of special treatment in the hope that that will buy them influence with the parents who are in power. And apparently it does work. And apparently the term is called going after the princelings. And it's just another way to influence Washington, D.C. But as Aaron Russo said in his documentary, America, Freedom to Fascism, most members of Congress would sell their own mother for $1. And that is unfortunately true here. Now, over in the Illinois election, it's rather interesting to study the rhetoric that came out in the speeches following the election, where Gene Ives, who lost, came on out and said, Illinois does not have a Democratic or Republican problem. It has a math problem. This was apparently the core part of her campaign message. Illinois is in serious economic trouble. And apparently the winner of the election, J.B. Pritzker, said, let's fund our schools properly so that children get a quality education. Obviously, we would all agree with that. They want to institute a progressive income tax so they can lower the tax burden on the middle class and those striving to get there. And let's work toward universal health care by passing a plan for a public option. Well, on the face of it, those sound like really good things. But we'll see how it's implemented. All politicians always have things that sound really good. They never really seem to happen. That's one of the big problems with our country. Now, let's get into this Cambridge Analytica. This is really blowing up to be a major story here. And interestingly enough, over at craigmurray.org, he's got an article which basically says Cambridge Analytica is part of the deep state, the surveillance state, and it's owned by a British company, SCL Limited, which basically does the same activities in Great Britain that Cambridge Analytica was undertaking in the U.S. Now, Rand Paul is saying that the deep state is real and dangerous, and he's absolutely right. It's all the bureaucracy, whether you want to call it the senior executive service or whatever. They're running the country. The elected officials are just there to take bribes and pass certain laws, but the day-to-day operation of the country is by all these unelected bureaucrats. And it reminds me of when the John F. Kennedy signed an executive order to remove control of covert paramilitary operations from the Central Intelligence Agency and transfer it to the Pentagon. In his words, he wanted to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter them to the wind. This was right after the Bay of Pigs, when Kennedy realized how badly the CIA had lied to him. But it was never implemented. The bureaucrats just refused to go along with it. And what we really do need right now in this country is for Donald Trump to put on those presidential brass knuckles and start getting the shop under control. He almost needs to go back to his reality TV persona on The Apprentice and start saying, look, you're either doing what I tell you or you're fired. He seems to be doing that a little bit in the White House, but it needs to accelerate. Now, apparently, Cambridge Analytica was also providing data to Kiev, trying to build profiles to make it possible for Kiev to regain control of the Donbass region. And this came out of British TV broadcaster Channel 4. So this is a major player. This is a major fixer. Now, Cambridge Analytica reportedly used Israeli hackers to steal emails. This is reported out of The Guardian. And basically it says that Cambridge Analytica obtained emails stolen by Israeli hackers and had ordered staff to analyze the stolen troves in search of any information that could compromise rivals to their clients. So, yeah, they're definitely the fixers. Article out of Russia Today, Cambridge Analytica story proves Facebook doesn't give a toss about privacy or democracy. And that's absolutely true. Facebook has put profits over privacy. And apparently, right after they started allowing companies to hoover up users' data, Facebook's earnings went up by £12 billion. This according to an article that came out of the Daily Mail. Now, Zuckerberg has now come on out and sort of did a mea culpa. We need to regain your trust. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Facebook users are feeling very, very betrayed and invaded about all of this stuff right now. Interestingly enough, an old tweet of Zuckerberg has surfaced from an earlier incident where people were asking, is our data on Facebook private? And apparently he tweeted out, if Facebook gets you got your private info, it's your fault for being a dumb, you can fill in the rest yourself. And it did, and it's having effect. Facebook's stock has dropped 9% on Monday, another 9% on Tuesday, probably got hammered today. The Dow just took a major clubbing. I imagine those stockbrokers are feeling like baby seals right about now. But Facebook is facing the potential of trillions, with a T, of dollars in fines for violating Federal Trade Commission privacy rules. And advertisers are starting to pull out. Commerce Bank, Mozilla are suspending their ads. More are following. So this is a major disaster. We could actually see Facebook go away. Now, one of the problems is that Facebook allows developers to write their own apps. And these apps are given access to the user data. And they're called basically vampire apps. These are third-party apps that plug into the social network and access its data. And apparently some of them can still track you after you remove your account. And there's an article at whatreallyhappened.com about how you can stop them. You're going to have to work to regain your privacy. Nobody in this country is respecting your privacy except yourself. The government is openly contemptuous of the Fourth Amendment. The NSA has proved that. Facebook has proved it's applied to corporations as well. If you value your privacy, you're going to have to do something about it. We're going to take a break to commercials. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go to the phone lines here, again, if you are able to help us, we need your help. The corporate media are being funded by corporations that want to basically control what you're thinking, politicians that want to control what you're thinking. They've got lots of money. They're losing money hand over fist, but the power brokers keep pouring more money in. We need your help to keep up. And we're in a war right now. You can see how the corporate media is trying to bring censorship back to the United States of America. They want to shut the independent media down. We have to fight back, or we're going to be facing a global, potentially nuclear war. The independent media right now is the only entity inside the United States that is standing up to this war agenda, and we need your help to keep working. So if you can, the address to send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to call on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. The network thanks you. I thank you. We need your help. It is that serious. Okay, now, let's take some phone calls, and we're going to start with Mark in the Netherlands. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was just wanting to give you an update here from the Netherlands on our little referendum. We got the ability to do non-binding referendums in July of 2015 after a big fight to get it.
Yes.
And of course, we had the first one we had was where we had enough people sign up for it was the Ukraine Association Agreement. And we voted, of course, 61% to not let that go through. The European Union was completely pissed off about it. And eventually they just didn't listen to the people and went ahead and made an association agreement with the Ukraine. Now, yesterday we had our vote about the new, what would be considered the NSA ability in the Netherlands to trace telephone calls, break into people's computers, use spyware. Also, if one person in the neighborhood is considered to be a terrorist, then they can tap the entire neighborhood, this kind of stuff. We voted on that yesterday. Surprisingly, even with all of the fraud that's going on, it passed. But the Dutch government took away our ability to have referendums in the future, and they're going to ignore this result.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought as well. Imagine my shock. But at the same time, it just goes to show that we can't have democracy. We cannot have democracy because we're ruled by a bunch of freaks from the European Union, and we are not allowed to have our own country with our own rules. They are coming in and telling us what we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, the world is sinking into fascism.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, and I do follow you quite often. I lay in bed at night, fall asleep usually before the end of the show because of the time difference.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask you this. I know we're going to war. We may already be at war if we were to write a history book in the future. But I always have the question, is there going to be a financial collapse first or after the shooting starts? What do you think?
Well, it's almost a race. And I think the reason why we're seeing such effort being put in to start the war is because if the economy collapses and they don't have a war as a distraction or to blame it on, then the people of all these countries are going to point to the bankers and the private central banks and the corrupt politicians and say, this is all your fault. You messed this up. And I think that's why they're trying to get into a war. And as far as the U.S. is concerned, they've done it twice before. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. And the U.S. is now officially admitting that they're at war with 7 different countries. So, yeah, I think future history books are going to say that World War III was already underway by this time in history.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And the thing that amazes me is I don't know how many Americans are aware of it, but if you just look at the number of bases that the United States has outside of the country, and then you compare it to something like Russia, I think Russia has 3 military bases, and America has like 800 or something like that, or even more.
Yeah, the U.S. has garrisoned the world like the ancient Roman Empire, and they've bankrupted themselves in the process.
Yeah, I think that's why I always ask, is it going to crash financially first? Because if you study any of the Roman history or whatever, then of course after 475 AD, when the barbarians came in to Rome, there's no history after that. Up until 1200, it was just complete chaos for 500 years after that.
And now we have the barbarians storming the gates again in Europe and the United States. Illegal immigrants and refugees. It's happening all over again.
And if you combine that with some of the things that are going on, I have a small story from my work if you want to hear it.
Well, Mark, I'm going to have to hold you over the commercial break, so don't hang up. We're going to put you on hold, and we'll get right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're still talking with Mark in the Netherlands. You had a story you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, it's just about some of the things that are blowing over from America with the militant kind of attitude that's going on. We have a gentleman at work that declared himself a woman and started using the women's bathroom, and some of the women were intimidated and complained about it. And then my work said, hey, just use the guy's bathroom and then try to be normal about it. And then he went and got himself declared a woman legally, because, the Netherlands is pretty progressive when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yes. And
now he has made it known to everyone at work that he's not only is he a woman, but he's also a lesbian. And so now the women are so intimidated that they go in pairs to the bathroom because they think that he's going to go after them because he's a lesbian.
Oh, God, this has just gone. And what's funny is I always joke about I'm actually a lesbian trapped in a man's body. And now here it is. Some guy's actually trying it for real.
Yeah, this guy's actually doing it for real. And it's really, if it weren't so funny, just kind of off the wall weird, but it's actually, this kind of thing is happening all the time. And what it's really funny is in a progressive country like the Netherlands, and I know you spent some time in Germany, which is similar, things like homosexuality and stuff, where they fought for acceptance in the 70s and 80s, and then now it's gone completely off the wall, the weird behavior. And I don't quite understand why that should be acceptable anymore. But I guess that I'm from another generation. So
yeah, well, me too. And I don't find it acceptable. I'm all in favor of tolerance for the gays and acceptance of them. And throughout my life, I've had a lot of gay friends, gay family members. Okay, but this idea of the new liberal idea that you can just wish yourself to be something else, that's a disconnect from reality. And that is really very, very dangerous.
And as a scientist, biologically, there are only two genders, and it has nothing to do with whether or not someone, what does California have now? Like 1,000 genders or something like that? I don't understand it anymore.
I've lost count. I've lost count. But again, it's being driven by an agenda to make us doubt ourselves and lose our sense of self and identity to make it easier to control us with propaganda. And we all have to fight back by saying, this is who I am. This is what I am. And you're not going to convince me otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I wanted to really thank you for the call, and thank you for entertaining me here in the evenings as I'm laying in bed trying to get some sleep. But usually I'm really pepped up when I listen to your show.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words. Anything else?
That's it. And thanks for taking the call.
All right, you got it. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over to Paul in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. I'd just like to make a comment about, you said something about over in Israel. They said we will be ready to fight for Israel. And this issue has been addressed back in the middle or late 90s when Michael New refused to wear a UN blue beret when they were falling in out in Macedonia. And he got court-martialed for that.
Well, I know when Lieutenant Aaron Watada refused to serve in Iraq because he thought it was a war crime. They came close to court-martialing him, but there was so much public attention on the case that eventually they backed down. But it is a fact under the United States Uniform Code of Military Justice, serving service people have a legal right to refuse illegal orders. And obviously, this came out of the Nuremberg trials and the so-called Nuremberg defense. I was only following my orders, yeah. And so they basically established a principle that individual soldiers, sailors, air people are obligated to refuse, to reject orders that they believe are illegal or war crimes. Unfortunately, most of them don't, and those that do are made example of.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's right. He was made an example of, but they court-martialed him, but later on, you can look him up, and he and his father have both got a website talking about this, and that's the same issue, and I'd like to see people stand up against that, because we can't afford to be taking care of another country. We got enough problems in our own country.
We've been taking care of Israel almost since its creation. We're talking huge amounts of money taken from the American people and given to Israel, along with all kinds of weapons technology. We've spent something like 10 times more on Israel than we spent on the Apollo, the race to the moon, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all put together, tiny fraction of it. And we haven't really gotten much of anything back from Israel in exchange for all that money, except that they come on in and tinker with our internal politics. At least out of Apollo, we got microchips and we got, Velcro and various other good things like that. But right now, we're in a crisis situation. Interestingly enough, one of the stories I have in my talking points basically says that 89% of our senators and representatives hold dual citizenship with Israel. 89%.
Really?
I knew the problem was bad. I didn't know it was that bad. Apparently over in the Senate, it's Richard Blumenthal, Barbara Boxer, Benjamin Cardin, Dianne Feinstein, Al Franken, Herb Kohl, Frank Lautenberg, Joseph Lieberman, Carl Levin, Bernard Sanders, Charles Schumer, Ron Wyden, Michael Bennett, and House of Representatives. It's a huge, long list. And our government has been subverted by a foreign power, and we should be very, very angry about that. Other nations do not allow dual citizenship in the government. You have to be a citizen of that country to be in the government of that country. But that's one of the reasons why we're always being sent over to fight Israel's wars. And that's why we've got these American commanders saying that U.S. forces should be ready to die for Israel. There was actually a cartoon out a couple of years ago showing an American soldier and a admittedly stereotypical caricature of a Jewish person saying "Forward March," and the banner headline was "Join the U.S. Army, die for Israel." And when that cartoon came out, of course, Israel said, "Oh, it's anti-Semitic, it's Jew-hated, blah, 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 blah." But here we are actually having this happen. Join the U.S. Army and you're expected to die for Israel.
Yeah, I copied his quote. I got a copy of his quote when he said that the commander over there on the Juniper Cobra mission. Or what. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for taking my call, and I enjoy your program.
Well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here and take a call from Steve Elkins. Steve, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
The question, just to confirm this is true or not, is there a plan to actually tear down the high school in Parkland High School after the school year?
They're tearing down that one building, and that follows with a lot of other false flag situations where they just want to get rid of the evidence. They tore down the Murrah building. They tore down the church at Waco, Texas. They demolished the World Trade Centers and quickly sold the steel to foreign nations just to get it on out of there. But yes, they're tearing down that one building where it all happened.
So is that one building right now being used by the students or not?
I really do not know. I would imagine probably yes. It's the freshman building. And I don't know that the
Well,
school...
then my question would be if it's all right to go to school now in that building where the children were killed, then why tear it down after the school year if you're already in that part of the school having classes still? So other than getting rid of the evidence so independent investigators can't go and actually figure that thing out and, expose the truth, that's kind of what I see it's happening, because if the kids are going to school there now in the area, they're going to tear down because it's too traumatic for them. Well, it's too traumatic for them. It's too traumatic for them right now also. So why let them go to school in that section of the building and then tear it down? That's my question. Well,
again, it's a pattern we've seen before where there's an obvious false flag and all the evidence is quickly disposed of. It's a classic pattern of cover-up. When Vince Foster was found in Fort Marcy Park, the FBI went on in there and literally bulldozed all the soil up, completely changed the landscaping so people couldn't go in there. Independent investigators couldn't go on in there and take a look for what was going on. I mean, you can't visit the crime scene today because of what they did.
Yeah, that's what I thought was happening. That's their protocol, how they do it, I guess. So that's too bad because, I think we already know what happened there. So, but
I agree. I absolutely agree.
That's how they take care of business, cover up the crime.
By the way, Time Magazine's coming out with an issue talking about how children are, because those are the weapons that the government fears to have in the hands of the American people.
It looks like mainstream media has kind of backed off this David Hogg guy, I guess because I know independent media has exposed him as a crisis actor. I mean, he's in California, in Carlsbad, doing something there, and now he's living in California. I'd like to see a transcript and actually some school records to see that this kid actually goes to that school. I don't think he does. I think he is indeed a crisis actor, and I think they finally learned that they can't push the David Hogg thing anymore because he is a crisis actor.
Well, actually, he already graduated high school out in Redondo Beach before his family moved over there to Parkland.
It's even better.
Yes.
He really is exposed.
Well, if there's one thing that the independent media can claim victory regarding, we have taken away the government and corporate media's ability to lie to the public with impunity. And that's why I like to say that the lifespan of a government or a corporate media lie today can be clocked with an egg timer. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, it took something like 30 years before half the population understood the Warren Commission was a cover-up. And today, the process operates much more quickly, at minutes, seconds even.
Well, that's it for me, Michael. Hey, thanks. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take one more phone call, then get back to the news here. Art in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, I'm very disturbed about this, about what that general said, but at the same time, 89% of the Congress are not Jewish. They would have, it would have, because the only way you can be a dual citizen of Israel is to be Jewish. So, but I know, I personally don't believe anybody who's a dual citizen should be able to serve in Congress or any position in the government.
I agree.
Why he's allowed to be Jewish is beyond me. But, it's not, I can't see it being 89%. Just our two senators here in North Carolina, they're not Jewish. Neither is Mark Meadows, the only place you'll find most of them is maybe in the Northeast, California, and a couple other places, maybe in the Midwest. But, same time, it's very disturbing what that general said. And I think, and what something like this would lead to, if we get into a war over Israel, we get bogged down, let's say, with, Iran and Syria and all that, in a body bag, God forbid, start coming back. There's going to be anti-Semitism in this country like we've never seen before. I hate to say it.
I wouldn't call it anti-Semitism. I would call it anti-Israelism. Because the problem, anti-Semitism is used as a weapon to stifle dissent by claiming that we hate Israel just because they're Jewish. And we don't. I don't care about the Jewish people. I don't have a problem with Jewish people. Rivero is a Sephardic name. and my first wife was Ashkenazi. So this attempting to say that, I hate Jews is utterly ridiculous. I am opposed to the policies of the government of Israel. And we need to always frame our resistance and opposition to that narrow constraint. We're talking just about a few corrupted individuals in power, and we don't paint with a broad brush over the entire nation of Israel or the world's Jewish people. And I would very much hope that there wouldn't be any kind of such incidents in this country, because Israel will seize on them to get the U.S. government to pass even more restrictive laws on freedom of speech.
But what I'm saying, Mike, is this. I'm not saying anti-Semitism. Now, of course, there's always anti-something or another. There's always, but I look at some of the comments on the net, stuff like that, and I'm just saying, if Israel drags us into a war, whether you want to have anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish, because really Semites are a lot of different people, anti-Jewish attitudes in this country, that would cause it. It doesn't matter what the mainstream media, deep state, or anybody else wants to do. And it's a very disturbing thing, because I'm disgusted as an American by this general, what this general said, and on top of that, by AIPAC and stuff like that. I'm also disgusted, like you, as somebody of Jewish ancestry. I put America first. Everything else, all my other ancestries or whatever else, mean nothing to me. Okay, but so I really, I'm really hurting. Stuff like that really hurts. Like
yes.
The guy, and it should hurt everybody really, because this is, this is not what the Constitution says. This is not what George Washington wanted.
Art, hold that thought. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Don't hang up. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Art in North Carolina. And Art, I went back to that article. It was from Investors Watch blog. And I looked at the provided list of senators and representatives, and it doesn't line up. I think that somebody mistyped it. They meant to say 9% of our Congress are dual citizens, and I think that's a more realistic number. But even 9% in my mind is way too much, because you don't know what the loyalties of these people really are. And if you look at how constantly the U.S. Congress, Israel this and Israel that, and we're loyal to Israel, and we love Israel, and we're going to give Israel more of your money, it's very obvious Congress is not dealing with the needs and wishes of the American people.
And another thing too is that let's say 9%, that these 9% would go and become dual citizens in the first place. Why you want to become a dual citizen? You're born and raised in America and everything. Why you want to be a citizen of another country? I don't understand it. Now I know Steven Seagal became a citizen of Russia. He's a dual citizen, but at least he's not running for any kind of office, right?
Oh, not at the moment, no. And I wouldn't be concerned about Steven Seagal here, but looking at the history of the Israel lobby in the United States, we're obviously living under puppet rule. We have a Vichy government in Washington, D.C. That is ruling this nation for the benefit of a foreign power, and that is simply unacceptable.
There's another thing, too. Unlike we have a treaty with NATO, I think it's a bad treaty. I think NATO should have been broken up as soon as the Soviet Union imploded. But we do have a treaty, one for all and all for one. We don't have a treaty like that with Israel. We don't have any treaties as far as I know. We don't owe them a thing. Anything, they owe us. Okay? If they get attacked, that's their problem, not ours. Especially since they're provoking a lot of stuff.
You're absolutely right. That's another example of our federal government worrying more about this foreign country than it worries about the American people. Israel doesn't need our money. They've got a very high standard of living over there. They've used that money as kickbacks to get Congress to do what they want. They've used all that money to acquire many of America's best technology companies like Intel. And as a matter of fact, Elon Musk is over in Israel right now, talking business with them because they have acquired the best of America's technology, and they're now considered a technology superpower.
Yeah, exactly. You ever have that? Have you ever had that guy O'Keefe on as a guest? Not
Yes.
James O'Keefe.
Kevin O'Keefe. Yes,
Kevin
we've had him on
O'Keefe.
the show.
Ken O'Keefe. Yeah, you have had him.
Yes.
I'd like to hear him again. I mean, I've seen him on a couple of times on Crosstalk. He was very good there too. He didn't pull any punches.
No, he
And,
doesn't.
You know, anybody who really understands and loves this country should understand we're being made a mockery out of. And I suspect I suspect that Israel might have been involved in 9/11 too.
Oh, there's no
Especially when you
question.
look at the dancing in the middle.
There's no question.
No.
The only people actually arrested on the day of 9/11 turned out to be Mossad agents. Anyway, listen, Art, I got to let you go. We got to do station identification, and then we'll be back with another phone call, and then more news. I need to get into the news. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a little while because I'm falling way behind on the talking points here. So, Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. The Second Amendment's on my mind. And one of the questions that I have for you is, where's David Hogue and his band of merry men speaking out about this latest school shooting?
I think this one caught them off guard. It didn't use an assault weapon. There was only one person dead, and that's the shooter himself, because in this case, the school resource officer did his job properly. And I think that's why the corporate media is staying away from this, and David Hogue is staying away from it, because it sort of underscores the fact that had the school resource officer in Parkland done his job, that the shooting would not have occurred. And it just calls more attention to the fact that something was going on at Parkland that we're not being told about. And again, it gets back to that teacher who saw a shooter all in black. It gets back to that video of 3 police officers with these large rucksacks running out of the building, throwing the rucksacks in the truck and getting in and driving away, which, you know, has led a lot of people to think they were the shoot team, that there were actually 3 shooters, these 3 police officers that went on in and just shot a bunch of people. And they set up Nicholas Cruz as the patsy.
I totally agree. And the other thing that I wanted to, and I'm sure you're aware, YouTube banning all firearms off of their channel, like Spike Tactical and people that are, you know, that are just even promoting their company. People that are even playing games like Call of Duty, you're not even allowed to be streaming them or showing those videos on YouTube anymore. Straight attack on free speech and attack on the Second Amendment, I believe.
It definitely is an attack on freedom of speech. And YouTube's attitude, of course, is we're a private company. We can discriminate at will. This is the liberal argument, saying that it's okay for Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to be censoring. But these are the same people who went ballistic when a baker refused to make a cake for a gay wedding. So you can see the hypocrisy and the double standard that's on display there.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's just selective enforcement is what I'm thinking. And another name for the corporate media, if I may, Ministry of Smoke and Mirrors. I was wondering what you thought of that.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's an apt description. And, you know, YouTube is just starting their purge because there are a lot of gun videos. And they're taking down the videos that advertise companies that sell guns and accessories. They're taking down gun training videos. Apparently, they're taking down videos showing people building guns in their own home. They don't want anybody to know that. And, of course, I don't go to YouTube all that much, and I'm getting complaints that apparently my feed on YouTube has a nasty hum in the audio section, which I need to look into why that is going on. But, yeah, they're just trying to find ways that they can basically regain control of the minds of America. But they're being very obvious about it. People are seeing it. And that's why it's so counterproductive.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the last things, maybe take this into consideration. Have you checked into Steemit? Maybe broadcasting on Steemit?
I'll look into it. I'd like to get off of YouTube because I figure it's only a matter of time before they close my channels. I have 3 channels now, one for What Really Happened, one for Claire's music videos, and of course the live streaming channel for RBN. But I figure at some point YouTube is going to get around to shutting those down as well.
Yeah, I was wanted to bring up Steemit, and I'm not sure what DTube is. I hear a lot about it, but I haven't even looked into it myself. But yeah, you have a great day, sir, and give Miss Claire the best.
I certainly will. Thank you very much. And I know there's so much stuff I should be looking into, but if you had any idea how many hours a day I work at this, I'd love to have the resources to have a show booker to help me track down guests. I'd like to have some help maintaining the website. It's a lot of work. It really, really is a lot of work. All right, we're going to close the phone lines a little bit because I got to catch up on the news. We're talking about the Facebook scandal, and there's an interesting little article that came out of the allnewspipeline.com basically saying that Facebook is not so much social media as a data collection site where people who use Facebook are literally building dossiers on themselves that are then available to advertisers, marketers, companies like Cambridge Analytica, and of course the U.S. government. And it really is more of a surveillance system than it is anything else. And that's why independent media has said consistently, be very careful what you put on social media. Privacy was never guaranteed. Now, there is a rumor out that somebody's getting ready to file a class action lawsuit against Facebook on behalf of every single Facebook user, and it will be huge. And again, Facebook is looking at trillions in possible fines from the FTC for violations of privacy. So Zuckerberg may not be quite as rich as he has been in the past, and he's already losing money. The decline in the worth of the company has hit his portfolio. Now, we're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But the reality is we've lost our privacy. And a lot of people seem to have forgotten about the so-called fusion centers. And these are from the Department of Homeland Security. They're in all 50 states. Some states have more than one. And all they do is they spy on law-abiding citizens to just make sure we're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. And again, law-abiding citizens are being treated like criminals while the criminals are given a free pass. They're trying to take our guns away at the same time they were giving guns to Mexican drug cartels. It really is hypocritical in the extreme. Now, over at usawatchdog.com, Alex Newman is out there saying something that we've talked about before. The New World Order is targeting American freedom. And what's going on here is the New World Order is being brought into existence without our permission. It's being brought in through fraud, deception. And anytime you establish a government by that means, they have to end freedom of the people. They have to take away freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom to defend yourself, or they won't survive the circumstances of their own creation. And that's one of the many reasons I'm opposed to the New World Order and a global government. It will be the most tyrannical dictatorship in all of history. Another reason I'm opposed to a global government or a New World Order is that national borders serve the same function for our planet as fireproof doors in a building or watertight bulkheads in a ship. They contain an accident and protect the entire system. One of the reasons the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud went global was because of economic globalism. There were no barriers in place. There were no safety doors to shut. The contagion just spread all over Europe, and there was a huge panic to keep the system propped up. Okay, let's get into the war zones now. There's a lot of them going on here. Officially, the U.S. acknowledges we're at war with 7 countries with no congressional declaration of war for any of them. Now, over in Syria, the Syrian army has gained control of Harasta. The militants are running. And that's about 1,500 of the militants and 6,000 civilians are getting ready to leave the Harasta area. The 6,000 civilians are families of the militants, and they're all basically leaving the Harasta area of eastern Ghouta under an evacuation agreement with the Syrian government. Syrian government has gone in and said, you put down your weapons, you can leave. And a lot of these militants are saying, yes, they're tired of war. I can understand that. Now, Russia is again warning the United States against attacking Damascus. And Colonel General Rudskoy, the head of the main headquarters of the General Staff of the Russian Federation, basically came on out and said, if the U.S. attacks Damascus, it will be the last thing you do. So there's a lot of tough talk going on. And we keep hearing more and more words about the U.S. government planning another false flag chemical weapons attack and using that as a pretext for a decapitation strike against Damascus itself. Now, concern is being raised over Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman being in the U.S. on a shopping spree and buying all these U.S. weapons. And basically, analysts are saying this is going to serve aggressive rather than defensive purposes. These are not purely defensive weapons he's buying. Saudi Arabia is getting ready to escalate war in the region. Now, U.S. continued support for Saudi Arabia, especially in Yemen, is all tied up with the desire to oppose Iran, which is trying to basically calm things down, the same thing as Russia is trying to do. And unfortunately, we had that bill in Congress that was going to return the power to declare war to Congress, where it belongs under the Constitution, and a majority of senators voted it down. Now, apparently, during the conversations between Trump and, well, actually, it was a meeting, basically said that one of the reasons they're building up military equipment in Saudi Arabia is to, quote, make Russia pay, supposedly for Syria. But they're putting all these weapons into Saudi Arabia, it looks like, ahead of an expected major regional war. 15 years ago, the U.S. went on into Iraq on the excuse that Iraq had nuclear weapons and was going to start using them for no particular reason. More than 1 million people killed. The country bombed back to rubble, still recovering from all of that. We all know the war was started with lies by George W. Bush and phony Tony Blair. Nobody has been held responsible. And that right there is a high crime. Because I think any leader who tricks their population, lies to their population to start a war of conquest, that is the highest of the high crimes and misdemeanors any leader can commit. Now, Iraq apparently has been rounding up ISIS members, and it has sentenced 3,130 of them to death for connections with ISIS and other militant organizations since 2013. So they're going to have themselves a major hanging party over there, and that might cool the ardor of people wanting to join ISIS. There's actually a bizarre phenomenon out there, mostly in Europe, of children of very rich parents who've got the resources literally going on into these war zones and joining with ISIS just to have the experience of shooting a gun at other people, and then they quit, leave, and go back home. It's war tourism, which is, I think, a little sick. But it's a very real phenomenon. Meanwhile, of course, the ghost of Muammar Gaddafi has come back to haunt Sarkozy because apparently Sarkozy has been arrested on the grounds that Libya financed his election campaign in 2007. And what needs to be remembered is that Sarkozy then turned on Gaddafi and helped go into Libya and get him killed. In fact, there's a story out there that the French Secret Service actually carried out the execution of Gaddafi. And Sarkozy was out there proclaiming himself the liberator of Libya. So I can imagine Gaddafi was a little angry about that betrayal. Now, Gaddafi's son is considering of running for the in the presidential election this year. And he's widely supported by ordinary Libyan people wanting to get Libya out of the clutches of NATO and the puppet regime. So this guy's got a target on his back right now. Okay, apparently there's word now coming on out by Senator Bob Corker, who was interviewed on CBS Face the Nation, basically saying that Trump is going to make a massive move against Iran in May, that he's not going to extend the P5+1 deal. He's going to pull out of it, and that obviously is a prelude to war. Now, I don't know what pretext they're going to have, because Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't even at the beginning of the P5+1. Everybody who went in there said, yeah, there's nothing there. Iran doesn't have chemical weapons. Iran isn't invading anybody. So what's the excuse they're going to use? Is there going to be a false flag? Will there be a mushroom cloud somewhere and say, oh my goodness, Iran just attacked us? They do seem to be that desperate to do something like that. And when we see that shocking news report of this, whatever atrocity it's going to be, we have to take a moment to sit and think about it and decide for ourselves if it makes any sense. Just like we did with Assad and the claims he was using chemical weapons on his own people. It didn't make sense. Assad got nothing from that. He didn't have a motive to do that. We have to stay calm here and not get stampeded into a big mistake. And World War III will be a big mistake. Because I don't think the United States can win it conventionally, not with our drawn down stockpiles, our worn out equipment, and the condition of the recruits. Because the military have been lowering their standards for recruits. And they're not exactly getting the cream of the crop. That's one of the reasons they had all those accidents with the ships out there in the Western Pacific. They had inexperienced bridge crews. They're just scraping the bottom of the barrel, trying to find people to put on out there. Now, getting on back to Libya, which before the ouster of Gaddafi was a very successful society, high literacy rate, good standard of living, very inexpensive gasoline. And since the overthrow of Gaddafi, it's descended into utter chaos, third world conditions. According to the United Nations, extrajudicial executions, torture, and slave markets still persist in Libya to this very day. And it's a reminder that every country the United States goes into and regime changes turns into absolute misery for the people who live there. Now, over in Israel, in the Galilee region, there's a town there that has suspended future building tenders for a 2,200 household residential development after the mayor learned that half the buyers were Palestinians. Talk about discrimination and apartheid. Now, the Israel government is trying to increase the number of Jewish residents in Galilee to demographically overwhelm the Palestinians. And so they authorized this 2,200 household residential development, and half the buyers are Palestinians. And so they basically said, no, nobody can do that. I expect the next thing that will happen is the Knesset will declare that Palestinians cannot buy homes in Galilee. They'll be that overt and blunt about it. Over in China, the war of words continues to escalate. Xi Jinping is challenging Trump in Taiwan, saying China will give up not a single inch of land. So that's getting very tense. Meanwhile, Taipei is sending jets and ships to keep an eye on that Chinese carrier strike group that's sailing around that island. So there's another potential flashpoint. We're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. Now, as we reported earlier in the week, the U.S., North Korea, and South Korea mid-level diplomats are having talks in Finland that are supposed to last a week. And the word coming on out is they're very constructive, and things are going along quite smoothly. And South Korea's Moon Jae-in is saying that it may be possible that it's going to be a three-way summit on Korea with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in, which I think is really, really good. But I think we can see where this is going. North and South Korea are clearly moving towards reunification. And the U.S. doesn't want that to happen. But I think that's what's going to happen. North Korea will surrender their nuclear weapons, reunify with South Korea to a united Korea, and that's going to be the end of that whole issue, we hope. Now, getting on back to the propaganda battle being waged by Great Britain against Russia over the poisoning of the Russian double agent. Apparently, the UK news service for kids is now broadcasting that Putin may be the most dangerous leader since Hitler. Oh yes, he's the new Hitler. So they're just pouring on the propaganda, and they're going for the kids. They're going for kids who are too small to realize that the big people they see on TV may not be truthful. They always try and get them young. Kindergarten, Sunday school, get them young and just give them these beliefs around which their personalities will form. Now, Germany and France have rejected the British proposed Russian sanctions over the Skripal case. They're saying basically the same thing that NATO said. This is one incident, one person. Sanctions are a dangerous overreaction. And of course, France especially has suffered economically from all these Russian sanctions. It's caused a great deal of unrest in their country. Now, everybody's looking at the Arctic as a new battleground, shades of Ice Station Zebra, but apparently U.S. Navy submarines are test firing torpedoes in the Arctic exercises, apparently trying to see if the torpedoes can successfully navigate underneath the ice if they're close to the surface. Because if you know anything about the ice pack, it's not smooth on the bottom. There are pressure ridges, there are all kinds of things that could get in the way. And torpedoes, if they hit those, obviously it's a failed launch. So they're working on that one. Meanwhile, the Pentagon's Arms Research Chief Michael Griffin is talking about space-based directed energy weapons. And what they're talking about is reviving a strategic defense initiative program for what are called neutral particle beams. These are basically neutron guns. They travel pretty much at the speed of light, and they penetrate a target. They're designed as a missile defense system. My concern is that once they hit the atmosphere, they may get into some problems with thermal blooming, because that's always been a big problem with any kind of long-range directed energy weapon. All the battlefield lasers being deployed now are short range to get away from that problem. But if you're talking about firing from orbit down to the ground, that's a lot of atmosphere to get through. And those neutrons, some of them are going to interact with the atmosphere. They're going to heat it. It's going to create turbulence, and that turbulence will spread the beam out. Meanwhile, over in Great Britain, they're just now finding out that the software upgrades for the Block 4 F-35B is going to cost 345 million British pounds. This is definitely the most expensive weapon program in history. And what it's produced doesn't really seem to be worth the money. for all the problems that it has had, continues to have, the high cost of maintenance and upgrades, great moneymaker for the companies making all these parts, not very good for the people who are having to pay for all of this. Now, as you know, the Congress reached a bipartisan deal yesterday to keep funding the government through 2018 to avert another shutdown. A lot of people are already saying this was an absolute bad budget deal. One thing is it has a massive military funding increase. It's the biggest increase in defense funding in 15 years. So again, you must make do with less so the war hawks can have a little bit more. Now, getting into the economic news here, Trump has imposed $60 billion in tariffs on Chinese imports, accusing Beijing of intellectual property theft. And yes, it is a problem with China not respecting intellectual property rules. In fact, when we come back from this commercial break, I have a story to share with you about that. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We were talking about Trump imposing $60 billion in tariffs on Chinese imports, basically accusing Beijing of intellectual property theft. And that is legitimate and valid. There is a problem with China not following patent or copyright, and it's been a problem for a lot of years. Back when Jeremy Clarkson was still on the Top Gear show on BBC, they did a segment in China, and he did this little bit where he was showing he'd been shopping for personal electronic devices, and he showed an iPhone clone made in China, an iPad clone made in China, a laptop, all copied from American designs, and no licensing fees paid. Many, many years ago, when Claire was working on her first album, Isle of Sanctuary, her computer got hacked into, and we discovered that somebody had copied off all of the audio files for the album. And we found the IP, and it tracked back to China. So there may be a Chinese knockoff of Claire's album over there. She could be a big hit in China. We don't know about it. But it is legitimate. I am, however, concerned over the fact that we're getting into a trade war, and that because of our debt load and other weaknesses in our economy, that we're probably going to lose this one. And a lot of people, I think, are thinking the same way because the stock market just took a hammering today. The Dow ended 724 points down. NASDAQ off 178. S&P 500 off 68. That's a bad day. Those brokers are probably feeling like clubbed baby seals right about now. Gold and silver took an upward swing here. Gold was up 1.8%, silver up 2.5%. Remember the other day I said silver is actually outperforming gold. And so don't turn your nose up at silver investment if you want to have some kind of wealth preservation. And I'm sure that Wall Street is going to be back at work trying to find some way to shove those prices down because they see precious metals as competition for the stock market and the banks. And they don't want people selling their stock portfolios and closing their savings accounts and getting into metals. They want very, very low gold prices, especially because the gold depositories are trying to buy up enough to make good on gold that was stored there by other countries. We covered all of that in America's Book of Secrets here. Now, we're already seeing the backflash from Trump's tariffs. And over in the Boston Globe, they're complaining because the European Union is starting to fire back. And one of the things they put a tariff on is cranberries. And cranberries are actually Massachusetts' top agricultural food crop. It was valued at close to $70 million in 2016. And now they're facing a 25% tariff on exports to Europe. So I can imagine some of those French farmers are already starting to set up cranberry farming. Now, banks are apparently going to get an extra $5 billion in interest from the Federal Reserve because of today's 25 base point hike in rates to 1.75%. Now, it's going to have little impact on how much interest is paid to the trillions of dollars held in checking and savings accounts across the U.S. It will have a notable impact on how much cash the Fed pays out to banks in the form of interest on excess reserves. So, once again, the banks are being subsidized, and we are not. Toys R Us has finally officially announced their liquidation, and we talked to some of the people at our local Toys R Us and Babies R Us, and they're going to be gone in about a month. So there's an article that came on out and said, does Toys R Us demise spell the death of retail? Well, we've seen retail in trouble for a long time, and we've seen a lot of iconic retailers going out of business or struggling. But the problem is, they're trying to blame online sales. They're trying to blame this, trying to blame that. The reality is the American people have just run out of money. We're all broke. It's one of the reasons I hate having to basically beg for donations. I know that all of you listening to this show are in as serious financial straits as we are. And we're just barely getting by. And if you don't have money, you can't go to the stores. We were over at one of the local malls, and a lot of retail vacancies. Now, Guitar Center is $1 billion in debt, and they're trying to restructure their financing and stay in business. But there's another factor here that people need to look at, and that is musical tastes are changing. Generally, musicians are moving away from actual, real musical instruments. Everything that I do for Claire's Choir is all electronic. It's all done on the computer. But I grew up playing piano, banjo, guitar, flute, and I hardly ever touch them anymore because you get more and better sound out of the computer systems. And I think that's definitely a factor. And it would be a shame. I don't want to see, traditional instrument playing going away, but it may become kind of a fringe area, like musicians that you see that are playing on Renaissance instruments, because it's kind of cool. Now, apparently, Time Magazine, Fortune Magazine, and Sports Illustrated are now up for sale. The publisher is going to cut 1,200 jobs. Now, I can understand why Time's circulation is down. They're some of the biggest liars out there. Fortune caters to the money junkies. Sports Illustrated, the only successful issue they have every year is the swimsuit issue. And they spend a huge amount of money on it. And people do like to buy and look at it, because some of those girls aren't even wearing swimsuits anymore. It's all body paint. It's got nothing to do with sports, of course. So let's talk. Let's open the phone lines. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines here because I'm past the important stuff here. Border Patrol agents in California are now refusing to turn over wanted felons because of California's sanctuary law. Their concern is that if they turn them over to police in California, they can't be sure local authorities will return the criminal aliens to federal custody. So now there's a bit of a turf war going on between the federal authorities and the California authorities. And this thing is continuing to ramp up. Now, interestingly enough, and again illustrating that the idea of a totally open border is ridiculous, over in Yuma, Arizona, security Border Patrol agents arrested a previously deported illegal alien with multiple felony convictions. So he just gets kicked out, comes right on back. Fortunately, they caught him. But I wonder how many of these illegal aliens are deported and they come on back and they get through. And these are criminals. We're not getting the best of the populations in these countries south of the border. We're getting the people that the government of Mexico is frankly happy to be rid of. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, Toys R Us, Sears, JCPenney, Macy's, that is America. When they go, we're finished. And they're gone. 90%. All of them.
Yes.
And Mike, Sears, man, when I was a small kid, I used to love getting that Sears and Roebuck catalog. Remember?
Yes.
That Sears toy catalog? Oh my God. I would flip through all the toys and it was the most amazing thing. And, but what year was Sears and Roebuck founded? 18 something?
Yeah, it goes back a long, long way. You know, I remember getting the Sears and Roebuck catalog and, you know, I'd peek at the lingerie ads. That was my entertainment.
Yeah, okay. I used to peek at them too. Oh,
You're busted. You're busted. Don't all the kids, all the boys would peek at that part of the catalog when the parents weren't watching. We didn't have Playboy back then. You know, it was either the Sears catalog or National Geographic.
Now they're right next to the cooking magazines in Barnes & Noble's probably.
Yes.
My friend went into Toys R Us the other day, and pretty much, I mean, they still had some toys here and there, but the video game section, that was all cleared out. There was like hardly anything there, and yeah, he's bummed out too how this iconic franchise, you know, when they closed the one in New York, which was their flagship store, that showed the end, right? And remember, what was the other toy company? FAO Schwartz, remember them?
Yep.
You know, like, and yeah, in Child World, you had Lionel's Kitty City. Yeah, Mike, things are going down. I mean, stock market hit today, 724.
Yep.
Now tomorrow, if the plunge protection team don't get in, we're not going to win this trade war. You know, all China has to do is put, tariffs on, like, soybeans, right? Like, they get soybeans. They'll crush our agriculture. They'll crush us.
Yes.
So we're not going to win this. Can they grow soybeans in Iran or Russia? Because,
in Russia, yes. Iran, I don't know so much.
Yeah, I don't know what vegetables or fruits or any if they can grow in Iran. But, if the Chinese do that, then can't they just say, hey, you know what, Russia will do? Because remember, on the 26th, isn't the petro yuan starting to come up on the 26th, I believe?
Yes.
Something's going on the 20th. Oh, no, the SWIFT system. That's it.
Yeah, the BRICS parallel to the SWIFT system. But yeah, the Shanghai Commodities Exchange has issued their next oil contracts denominated in the yuan rather than the dollar. Everybody's moving away from the American system. They're moving away from SWIFT. They're moving away from the dollar. We're an empire on its way down. And our task right now is to not let our government panic and blow up the rest of the world on the way down.
And Britain's also with us because if you notice, everything's coming to a head. Did you notice, like, everything's happening now?
Yes.
You got the trade war starting, the Russian, with trouble we're creating with Russia and this or that, and everything's coming to a head. And, and another person left than Trump's lawyer, right? I believe one of his lawyers left today.
Yeah, Dow. He was the lead lawyer defending Trump in the Russia investigation.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff happening. It's like you can't keep up. You really can't, Mike. Like, it's just something every day is happening.
There's a lot to keep track of. There is a lot to keep track of, but it actually takes me more time to put together my talking points than to do the actual show. So this is actually a full-time job.
That's all I wanted to say, Mike. Have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Joe in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to say a few brief things, not really wanting to dialogue, but just mostly say a few things. One of them is, as corporations become 1,000 or 1 million or $1 billion in debt, they go out of business. But the Federal Reserve is trillions of dollars in debt and remains open and pays no taxes back to the American people on anything. They just
it does pay taxes. It pays property taxes on the land underneath the Federal Reserve banks. But you're right. It's actually in the Federal Reserve Charter. They pay no taxes on the money that they make off the American people. And I know the Federal Reserve likes to say it's trillion.
Even though they pay the taxes on the property, that
they
wouldn't
pay the
be
taxes
enough.
on the property. But when we talk about the trillions in debt, that's the debt that we, the American people, owe the Federal Reserve for the use of their currency over the years. And nobody knows how much that really is because the Federal Reserve refuses a full audit.
Yeah, the point there was that they stay open while the regular mom and pop or anyone that if they went into debt or if they overdrafted their checking account, they would get life in the electric chair. But yet the people who make the rules don't apply to them. But that's just one topic. Another topic.
There's a historical precedent for that when Andrew Jackson shut down the second bank of the United States. They tried to operate as a regular depositor bank, and they went out of business after just 2 years.
Yeah, which would prove my point even more. The next thing I wanted to say is if the Nephites and the Jaredites still own Israel, and they owned it way before the Ashkenazis who came to occupy that land, wouldn't they still be entitled to the land instead of the people who are trying to own it now?
Well, again, the Palestinians have been on that land going back thousands and thousands of years. Contrary to Israel's propaganda, there's plenty of evidence of the existence of a Palestinian society and culture on that land. They were exporting agricultural produce. They had currency. But Israel just came and displaced them, using the shock of the story of the Holocaust to get political support, to literally grab a chunk of the land away. And the irony of it is the Ashkenazis are not, in fact, descended from the biblical Hebrews. That's something that they like to promote, to basically get Christians to go along supporting Israel. Most Christians think the present-day occupants of Israel are direct descendants from the Hebrews they read about in the Bible, but they're not. The Ashkenazi are descended from Central Asian Khazars. They simply adopted the religion of Judaism and then said, we're going to take over the land here, which makes about as much sense as me adopting the religion of Native American tribes like the Sioux and say, well, you have to give me back the land because we were here first.
Yeah, what I was meaning is thousands and thousands of years before the Ashkenazis occupied the land. This was way back, like around the time of the floods. And I'm not sure why they occupied the land there. They referred to it as the gateway of the gods, as though somebody who came from another planet entered that location. I don't know why they call it the gateway of the gods, but
well, it had nothing to do with space aliens. They called it the gateway because that was the corridor of trade. Prior to the establishment of sailing, anybody who was doing business between Africa, Asia, and Europe, they had to travel along that that eastern shore of the Mediterranean, and that made it strategically important. Anyway, Joe, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we return to the phone lines here, a story that's just coming on out now. Apparently, Cambridge Analytica have suspended their CEO, Alexander Nix, who was known for his global backroom influence. And amazingly enough, CNN is now trying to figure out some way where they can blame this whole mess on Russia. And Russia Today is already out there poking fun at CNN over the absurd assumptions and allegations that somehow this is all the fault of Russia was doing this. Russia was... And CNN wonders why their ratings are lower than... Anyway, let's go back to the phones. Dave in Missouri. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, howdy, Mike. Hope you're having a blessed day.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good. Beautiful day driving through Indiana here. I was in Virginia and West Virginia yesterday. Everything was snow covered. Just beautiful. This country is so gorgeous, but the poverty is so stark. And our infrastructure really is terrible. Trying to drive in Virginia Beach, any city you try to drive through, it just beats you to death. I'm on one of those highways right now, I-70, a major artery running right through the United States. And there are places of it where where you literally have to hold yourself up off the seat, just so you can still walk when you have to get out of the truck. I mean, and I haven't heard anything about Trump's infrastructure plan that he touted during the campaign and said was going to be next after the tax cuts. Have you heard anything about that moving forward?
Well, they're starting to talk about it, and they've allocated some money for it, but it's really just a drop in the bucket regarding what this country really needs. And considering how badly they botched that bridge down at the Florida International University, I think along with money is we've got to get our schools back to actually teaching people engineering, and we've got to stop handing these jobs based out on gender or race or orientation, because we're not getting the best people to do the best job that way.
Well, that's right. And forever, it's just been at the lowest cost, how the most profit that can be made from the corporations. Which leads me to my second point. You brought up the second bank of the United States and Andrew Jackson. I think we all were hoping that we were voting for Andrew Jackson. But unless Trump really grows some cojones and forces those presidential weight behind an audit of the Federal Reserve and really goes after the Luciferian pedophile deep state, the Clintons, all of the actors that we all know are so corrupt and who have driven us to such a place of despair and really economic certain doom. If he doesn't hold somebody accountable and go after the Fed to expose them for what they are, and force reform, as Andrew Jackson would have. I don't know, maybe he thinks he's waiting for his second term to do some of this. He won't get a second term because people like me are not going to vote for him again. If he lets Hillary and Cruz skate, if he doesn't do anything about the Fed, think I'm going to support him?
No, and neither am I. The only way I would support Trump in 2020 is if Hillary runs again. Dave, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to do a station identification, and we will be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go back to the phones now. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, you were talking about Guitar Center. Yeah, that's been, the whole guitar thing has been steadily eroding for many years, ever since they started. I can remember around 1970 in the 70s. If you were out on a picnic or something like that, the only way you could have music really was bring your own guitar, and then you could have music and sing and stuff like that. And
yes,
a lot of the poor people would try to play guitars because they thought they'd make it. For one thing, they had no. A lot of them did not have record players and stuff, and they'd try to. They'd have a dream that they could make, and some of them did make it. And there was live music. There was a possibility of making money, if not big time. You could make it small time, just playing small time gigs in a local bar or pizza parlor or something like that.
Yes.
And now with the whole electronic revolution is, unfortunately, like you said, I never heard anybody say it as bluntly as you did, but basically there's hardly any need anymore for people playing the actual instrument.
Yeah, the cost of technology. When the disco revolution hit, it put a lot of live bands out of business. And my brother's a musician, and he went through that period. Now he's back gigging again. It basically disincentivized people who were playing music as a commercial activity. A lot of them simply moved on over again to having portable players. Things like the iPod with a plugged-in booster speaker is very easy to carry, easier than a guitar. And again, as I've said, I get much better music out of this computer system for Claire's Choir than I would ever get just playing the piano or the guitar or the banjo or any of that stuff.
Yeah, but I still think live music is better. But here in the Philippines, I can remember like 15 years ago, I came here and there were, you'd see these guys walking around selling guitars for real cheap guitars, but people would buy one, and the Filipinos were good guitar players. That's one of the things they could do is they travel around Asia and play guitar. But now what's happening here in Asia a large extent is karaoke, videoke.
Yes.
Whatever you want to call it, is taken over, and that's the people have the illusion that they're performing live. Yeah, they're singing, but they're not actually making the whole thing. It's not really homemade music. They're singing along with the track. And anyway, you were talking about Guitar Center. I think another company that I believe went bankrupt is Gibson. Gibson Guitar Company. They're either on the verge of bankruptcy or they went belly up.
They got hit with some major fines regarding the source of some of the wood that they were using in their guitars. I think it was Gibson, which seems to have been politically motivated to benefit a competitor.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the Chinese guitar makers, they use that. It's Brazilian. I think Brazilian rosewood is the thing that's an endangered species or whatever. And the Chinese guitar makers have a big supply of that for some reason, and they sell guitars in American spine. But then Gibson tried to backdoor around the law somehow or whatever, and now they're going bankrupt. But yeah, I'm thinking there was one other thing I was going to say. I forgot.
Okay, well, if you don't have anything else, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the call, and we're going to switch over to Carrie in Philadelphia. Aloha, Carrie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. First-time caller, long-time listener, big fan. Love the show. I'd like to discuss the ultimate tool being wielded against American citizens right now, and it was announced to us on 9/11/2013 by Edward Snowden. And that is that the NSA shares raw intelligence with Israel.
Yes.
It's unfiltered, and it's on a regular basis. And that data, raw, unsifted, that's in my opinion, that's an act of traitor.
I agree. I agree. I mean, Israel has been known to blackmail our politicians, and the NSA just gave them access to more information that can be used to put pressure on American politicians.
Exactly. So all current politicians are compromised. And furthermore, what else can they get from that data? Insider trader information. They can trade on Wall Street unlimited and fund their evil operations even further. And industrial espionage. Not to mention, you can just use your imagination what else lays in that data. And that is the ultimate.
I agree. It's a very reckless thing to do, and it's just another reminder that our government runs this country for the benefit of Israel.
Absolutely. And it was, I think there was a significance on the date that he chose to announce that. It was 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just want to say that, I think one thing that we can do is we could band together. I mean, your listeners, your people that call in, I think they would make a great think tank. And we should form the What Really Happened think tank. I'd like to give a shout out to your, my two favorite callers are Pete in LA and Dustin in New Jersey.
Well, thank you very much for that.
I'd like people to discuss this matter about this raw data. Have you ever heard in the public that this was refuted?
No, it's never been refuted. It's just been ignored.
Refuted. Right. And I think it's the most important revelation in modern history of the most powerful tool being wielded against the American citizen. And I think we should probably form some type of class action lawsuit about all of our data being shipped to a foreign country, and that's traitorous, and they should all be hung, those that are involved with it.
I agree. It's a flagrant violation of the Fourth Amendment. It is a betrayal of the privacy of the American people to a foreign power who's going to use the information gleaned against the interests of this nation. And it absolutely is atrocious, and it should stop. But again, I think our government is too compromised by Israel. I think Israel has been blackmailing the United States government with 9/11 all these years, and that's why the U.S. can't say no to Israel. But the U.S. needs to say no to Israel. They need to start saying no to Israel's influence in our country because we're all paying a terrible price for it.
Can I share one more theory with you of mine?
Sure.
And that is of Trump and why Trump is siding with Israel. His daughter is married to Kushner.
Yes.
That's all I need to say.
Okay. Well, Kushner looks like he's on his way out anyway. So apparently Trump realized that Kushner was not giving him good advice, that Kushner was basically using Donald Trump to further his own ends. So he may be going on out. Anyway, Carrie, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to do a quick shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to go to Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, Mike, I have a three-part question of the same subject. Several times you mentioned that the last time Iran, and correct me if I'm wrong, the last time Iran attacked the country was 200 years ago. My first question is, who did they attack? And were they called Persia at that time? And were they independent or part of the Ottoman Empire?
You know, those are good questions, and I have to admit I don't actually have the answers, but it's definitely worth looking into. But the main point is Iran is not a threat to the region. They're not a threat to Saudi Arabia. They're not a threat to Israel. They mind their own business, and they just want to be left alone to take care of their country and themselves. And they're obviously very concerned over the fact that Israel is constantly starting wars against its Mideast neighbors. They're concerned about the fact that the U.S. is running around the world starting wars, and they have reason to be concerned about that. But Iran, culturally, is not an aggressive nation. And it certainly hasn't been since the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take a call from James in South Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I got two questions, Michael. Somebody called in and asked about the fellow David Hogg, I believe his name.
Yes.
And I've heard that he's 25 years old. And if was he enrolled in that school in Parkland, in Florida, or
no? The information I have is that he graduated from Redondo Beach High School while his family still lived in California, and then he got his first media exposure there in California. Then his family moved to Parkland, and as far as I've been able to determine, he was not, in fact, actually a student at that school, or if he was there under false pretenses.
Well, that's what I was trying to establish. Maybe he was there under false pretenses. Okay. I got a question about the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Do you think it is possible for the Federal Reserve, given the fact they're not audited or anything, is it possible for them to create money out of nothing and give it to some nefarious activity that no one knows anything about?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Now, the U.S. Treasury Department does the actual printing of currency, but the Federal Reserve can create money just by typing on a computer and send it to anywhere that they want to send it, as long as there's nobody watching. That's the problem with a private central bank. They're never going to go out of business as long as their charter is enforced, because they can just create whatever money they need to stay in business.
Well, if they have friends who want to start some kind of business, can they give money to those people, maybe through another bank?
Well, they're going to loan the money, probably through another bank. I mean, the Fed doesn't really deal with the consumer level, but I'm sure there's a little bit of back channel discussion saying, this is a friend of mine, or it's a nephew, or it's my offspring. They need funding to start a business, and they'll get favorable treatment from the bank. They'll get a loan at a discounted rate or something like that.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, and then the taxpayer is on the hook, whether it's a nefarious activity or whether it's a friendly loan or whatever. The taxpayer is on the, like Solyndra went out, lost $500 million in a year or something like that. I'm not saying Solyndra, they did it to Solyndra, but something like that.
Well, again, the taxpayer is on the hook for the accumulated interest on the national debt. And for its principal. Again, if there had been no interest on the national debt, if it was zero sum, then American taxpayers would have completely paid off the national debt, just starting at the Vietnam War, paying what we're paying on the national debt now, paying on the principal rather than just the interest. We would have paid off the national debt completely, and the Federal Reserve would have lost its hammerlock on the U.S. government. But again, the Federal Reserve and Wall Street are very generous donors to politicians' campaigns, and as a result, all that's being paid to the Federal Reserve is just the interest on the principal. The principal never goes down, and that's why we're being kept as debt slaves. And the reality is that with private central banking, because all of the currency issued is interest-bearing debt, there's always going to be more debt than money with which to pay the debt. And that's why you can't escape the clutches of a private central bank unless you shut it down the way Andrew Jackson did, or you have a revolution like the founding fathers had.
Well, you remember Bob Chaplin years ago?
Yeah.
Well, he was on a lot of shows. I think he died about 5 or 6 years ago. He made the statement one time, made it twice, that the interest goes to the Treasury. I mean, I don't know that he knew, but that's what he said.
I know that we're told that the interest goes to the Treasury, but that doesn't really make any sense because I think the Federal Reserve gets a chunk of it, at least to fund their operations. But the Federal Reserve is very opaque. They're fighting against an audit. They are a private company. They're not part of the U.S. government. In fact, there was an effort to pry loose some of the records about the true state of the economy with a Freedom of Information Act request, and it was rebuffed in court successfully with the argument that the Federal Reserve is a privately owned bank and not actually part of the government. There's even a video of former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan saying the Federal Reserve answers to no U.S. government authority.
Okay. I enjoy your show, Michael. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to immigration issues, apparently over in Germany, there was an Afghan refugee who brutally raped and then murdered a 19-year-old medical student, Maria Leidenberger, in the city of Freiburg. And he's finally been sentenced for life in prison. But again, it underscores that every nation needs to have control over its borders to decide who gets in and, more importantly, who does not. Now, the other day, we cited a story that claimed since 9/11, some 68,000 Americans have been murdered by illegal immigrants. And it's a stunning number. And so in a follow-up, there's a story in the Daily Wire, how many illegal immigrants have committed violent felonies? And apparently, that's one statistic the government doesn't bother tracking. Nobody really knows, how many rapes are committed by illegal immigrants. How many assaults, burglaries, car thefts? Nobody knows. It's not being tracked. It's like over in Europe. You're not allowed to say anything negative about the refugees or the immigrants because that might harm the open borders agenda, the globalist agenda. Now, the other day, we talked about how Los Alamitos in Orange County, California, passed an ordinance that defies California's sanctuary state law. Los Alamitos will now have their police and prosecutors cooperate fully with federal immigration authorities. And now we're getting a report from the Orange County Register saying that other cities, and maybe even the entirety of Orange County, are now thinking of doing exactly the same. So there's literally a revolt against the California government by the city and county governments who are saying, we've had enough of this. This uncontrolled immigration, it's just terrible. We've got thousands of homeless people in California cities, and yet we're expected to make room for the illegal immigrants and the refugees. It just doesn't make any sense. We've got to take care of our own people first. When America is back on track, when America is great again, when we have full employment and a comfortable living standard for all Americans, maybe then we can be generous about letting certain selected others into our country. But this open borders policy is just absolutely ridiculous. Trump apparently agrees. He's now cutting Obama-era refugee admissions by 77%. That's a good start. That's a very, very good start. Now, as you know, over in Italy, they just had their elections, and the Eurosceptics cleaned up. The Remainers got voted down. This prompted Angela Merkel and French President Macron to basically say some very bad things about what was going on in Italy. And so Eurosceptic leader Matteo Salvini hit back at France and Germany, saying, we don't need them. So already we're seeing more strains in the European Union. The euro's been a problem. The open border issue is a problem. There's an article here from Zero Hedge about the euro area's deepening political divide. Some of these member states are now saying they want to drop the euro. They want to stop doing business with the European Central Bank. They want to go back to their own domestic currencies. Because after all, Great Britain was allowed to stay with the pound rather than the euro. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about immigration issues around the world. And apparently things have gotten really bad in London, where Dr. Gareth Greer, who's the Air Ambulance Service's lead clinician, is now saying that the air ambulance gets called to more stabbings and shootings than road accidents in London. So again, same thing we're seeing in all across Europe and here in the United States. The more open the borders, the more crime goes up. And obviously, Britain's gun ban isn't stopping the bad guys from getting guns. There's a lesson for all of us to learn from there. Now, things in South Africa are just spinning wildly out of control, with their new leader basically saying, we're going to take away all the farmlands from the white people and give it to the black people. And apparently, there's now literally a genocide being launched against the white people. Australia apparently is now offering refugee status to any whites from South Africa. But there have been attacks on farmers already. They're being shot at. Very ugly story here from the Australian media. 5-year-old boy forced to watch as 5 men tied up and sexually assaulted his mother. It's open season on whites. The government is not doing anything. I imagine those white people are probably feeling the way the Palestinians are right about now. Okay. Now then, the director of Homeland Security has basically gone public saying there is a problem. And that is, of course, we can't audit the U.S. elections. Now, that is something that the vote riggers have been pushing for a very, very long time. Electronic machines, counting in the back room, no voter ID, and so forth. But the national security, the Homeland Security chief is basically saying that this inability to audit U.S. elections is a national security concern, and that something has to be done before the midterm elections in November. I heartily agree. Our election system is a joke. It's absolutely a joke. And it does need to be fixed. Or the Democrats are going to take Congress in November, and Trump will be a one-term president. Now, getting on back to the Parkland situation, interesting story has evolved. As you know, Nicholas Cruz had moved in with another family. They'd taken him in. And apparently, the woman who took him in reveals that he punched her and she feared he would shoot her. And she kept calling the police, and the police kept saying they could not intervene. Now, that tells me that somebody was protecting Nicholas Cruz while he was being groomed as the patsy. Now, the March for Our Lives, which is a demonstration involving survivors of the Parkland school shooting that's going to take place Saturday in Washington, D.C., and apparently across the country, registered a 501c4 nonprofit advocacy organization that is not required to disclose its donors. So we don't get to find out who is funding this push to confiscate all of our guns. Over in Denver, as you know, their state legislature passed a ban on bump stocks, ordered everybody to turn them in. Not one did. They're hanging on to their weapons. I guess they know what's coming. I don't want to see an armed rebellion or civil war in the streets of this country. But if one is to come, we the people are guaranteed the right to be armed equally to the forces of the government itself. And that's what they're trying to take away. That's why they're obsessing about the so-called assault rifle or sporting rifle and large magazines. Those guns aren't really used in crimes. They're used only in the staged false flag shooting sprees. They want those guns because those are the guns that give the American people parity with the U.S. forces. Apparently, in this latest interim budget deal, they included a provision for a national gun registry. So people who are owners of guns are going to have to deal with that nonsense now. And, of course, the only purpose to have a gun registry, a national gun registry, is to know on whose door to knock when they finally get gun confiscation passed. We're heading out in a very, very bad direction here. Over in Great Britain, their latest national security threat turns out to be a joke. Scottish YouTuber Mark Meehan, better known as Count Dankula, apparently taught a pug dog how to imitate the Roman salute, aka the Nazi salute, and now he could be looking at 2 months in jail. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and it's just now being announced that National Security Advisor McMaster is going to be leaving the White House. The rumors are still swirling that John Bolton will be named to replace him. That is bad news. John Bolton has made his entire career out of lobbying for war with Iran. And we're going in a very, very bad, very reckless, very dangerous direction right now in this country. It's painful to watch. You know, I was born in this country. I grew up in this country. I love the country. I love the people. But it's like watching somebody you love who's come down with a wasting disease. And day after day after day, you see them getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And you try your best, but you're not able to stop it. And that's what this feels like to me. This is going on here. Anyway, getting into the realm of political correctness. Apparently, a resident advisor at the University of Pittsburgh recently put up a display warning students about toxic masculinity and the social reproduction of patriarchy. And apparently, as part of the display, it says the expression, be a man, is an example of toxic masculinity. And they're saying that masculinity contributes to a variety of mental health issues. So now, apparently, if you want to be a man, you're now mentally ill. I'm sure they've already got a pill out for that one. Here's one of the reasons why I don't think we should be getting into any more wars. We've raised a generation of these delicate snowflakes, and we're going to give them guns and expect them to fight fiercely for the United States of America? No, they don't have it in them. They just don't. Now, a North Carolina State University sociology instructor is saying that vegetarianism promotes white masculinity. And I mean, it really is silly. Now they're saying that women who take yoga are guilty of cultural appropriation because they're not actually Indian. That's like saying people who take kung fu are guilty of cultural appropriation because they're not Chinese. You can see how ridiculous this is getting here. And apparently over at Simmons College, the librarians have invented new microaggressions, specifically concerning hate or hatred of LGBT people. And they're saying, even saying God bless you is a microaggression. It's going to trigger people. Grow a thick skin. Buy a helmet if you have to. But this idea that we're not allowed to just be polite, it's a microaggression. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Jeff in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, aloha. I love your show.
Thank you.
Guy called in half an hour ago about the need for a think tank. I called in about the think tank a few weeks ago. I believe that we need to be organized. We need to develop some of these ideals that RBN is presenting. And if there's a way that we could have like a think tank on an RBN site, and so because once we get organized and develop a way forward, we can get it to the local, the state, the federal politicians. Once it's out there in the open and a guy speaking this on the House floor, you're going to see it's going to be like a magnet. I'm already seeing the Christian Zionism dying out. I was one of them.
Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of things happening. Yes, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. The Christian Zionists are starting to realize how they were just badly exploited to push Israel's agenda. And they're horrified by some of the things they're seeing happen to Christians over in Israel. So, that movement is kind of starting to fade and fizzle.
Yes. And, I used to always call in about the Kennedy thing because every forum on the internet about Kennedy is controlled. You'll never get to the truth of the coup d'etat of who was involved because they're organized. They have all the money. They have the apparatus. And they're trying to snuff out our free speech. But if we're organized, I believe we have enough manpower. We might be able to give them a game. Thanks, Michael.
Well, you're welcome there. We could adopt the megaphone approach. And for those of you who don't know, megaphone is a messaging system developed by Israel and given to Israel supporters that has a little window on the screen of your computer. And anytime they see something that challenges Israel, they'll type it into that little window. It pops up on all the other windows logged into the net, and they immediately go to that forum and that comment board, and they jump all over them. And that's one of the ways in which they're successfully organized. The other situation is that Israel literally pays Jewish students in this country to be online advocates for Israel. So they don't have to go out and try and find a job in a fast food restaurant or something like that. They just sit at home and they type all the time. We have another caller, Ray in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to comment on Sears and Roebuck. I know that Dustin enjoyed the catalog as well, you, and I also enjoyed it very much. And I wonder if you remember the song somebody had made about a particular year when a male model was exposed, and there was a song about it, something like page 162. I don't actually remember, but it was kind of funny at the time. Do you recall?
No, I don't recall that, but I do recall. I mean, this is all before Playboy came along, where, right. You'd look at the lingerie ads, or you'd go to National Geographic, because National Geographic, had pictures of naked and semi-naked women from around the world. And, as long as the parents didn't see what you were looking at, they figured you were educating yourself and they'd leave you alone.
No, I agree. And it was very interesting. But there was a song, and I'm pretty sure it was that catalog. It might have been J.C. Penney, but I was only 11 or 12 at the time.
Yeah, I don't recall anything about that at all. When I was actually growing up in New England farming country, I was a little more isolated from the rest of the world because it was farming country. We only got 3 TV channels, and the only radio I had was one I built myself, and I won a school science fair with that. There was like one station in New York and one in Manchester that I could pull in with this, and I didn't spend a lot of time listening to it. But when I came out to California, my family moved to California. We arrived on my 12th birthday. Talk about culture shock. And oh my, it was intense. It was very intense.
Well, I'm originally from California, but I grew up in the sticks of Napa Valley, if you will.
Oh.
But I wanted to comment on Israel right quick.
Yes.
Before I let you go, I have kind of walked the middle line as I've heard you discuss the Israeli topic many times. But I've got to tell you, after seeing this interview where Netanyahu literally dominated this press conference with Mr. Trump, President Trump, I was somewhat alarmed. Then I saw him on Mark Levin on Fox on Sunday recently, and I was, again, somewhat shocked that he is just dominating the narrative and running right through. And I was surprised.
Yeah. No, Netanyahu gets a lot of media coverage, and he uses it to try and influence the American people, and the media is very much on his side.
Well, I thought you said 85% of.
No, I went back and I checked the article. And apparently, whoever typed the headline to the article mistyped, and I did a count. It comes out to 9%, just 9%. But even that's too much.
It's still outrageous.
It is still outrageous. Other countries do not allow people holding foreign citizenships to be in the government, and it seems to make a great deal of sense to me that we should have the same thing.
How can they have allegiance to the United States in their oath of office with dual citizenship? Have a great day, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Well, remember, no man can serve 2 masters. That also applies to a government. No government can serve 2 masters. And a government that is serving Israel cannot, does not, and will not serve the American people. Let's go back to the phones here. Thomas in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've only listened to part of your show. I've been busy in and out. But I heard you talking about, we talking about YouTube.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody has proposed this yet, but, YouTube is phenomenally successful. But it's now been corrupted. How hard would it be for someone who knows how to do it to literally form a corporation and launch a parallel YouTube? And what they could do is they could offer it as people buying stock in it. Maybe make it reasonable, like $10 a share. Everybody would pile in on that because it's not even a question of whether it would be successful. You know darn well that it would be as successful as YouTube. It's a freebie, and whoever would do that, people would buy into it. The stock prices would probably go up. So it'd be, if you keep the price cheap too, it could even be just a form of, hey, I'm just going to buy 1 share. You buy 1 share for $10 or $25 or whatever they put it at.
Well, you could crowdfund something like that, but the thing is, there are already alternative video streaming sites. We had a caller call into the show earlier mentioning a couple of them, like DTube and Steemit, and there's a bunch more. Just go on with a web search engine and type in alternatives to YouTube, and you'll get a list. And people are starting to move on over there because of the YouTube censorship.
But wouldn't it be neat if somebody launched a public offering where you could actually say, look, I'm going to go to a stockbroker and I'm going to buy a share or 2 or 10 or 100 or whatever I feel like buying. And possibly you could get in on the ground floor of something that actually made as much. YouTube apparently is worth billions.
Well, that's not the way it really works. I mean, you do a startup company with private investment, and if it's successful, you reach a point where you can do your initial public offering, and at that point, stock certificates are created in a computer or printed. I don't know if anybody actually prints a stock certificate anymore. And you can sell the stock, but you can't do a startup out of the gate and be listed on the stock market. It's just not the way it works. You could do crowdfunding and get your startup capital that way. But again, there are a lot of players getting into the game right now. I don't think we need a new one. We just need to find one that respects the First Amendment, and we all need to give them our support.
Oh, I certainly would, and I'm sure everybody else would too. Yeah, I'm just waiting for that. And I need to bone up and find out which ones are good and start going there. But I'm kind of stuck on YouTube at this point, you know.
Well, I'm getting ready to dump this YouTube channel because apparently there's some kind of an audio problem that I can't hear at this end, but apparently it's affecting the replay. And I don't know if it's just YouTube not functioning correctly or deliberately trying to degrade my video. But I'm going to leave and go someplace else really, really soon. Anyway, Thomas, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Terry in California. Terry, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm really confused about Trump. On the one hand, I always have been. On one hand, he's fighting with the deep state. He's going to, make America good again and all this kind of thing. And on the other hand, he's a servant for Israel, and he's continuing on with the wars. And I've been so conflicted with this man. I don't know what to think.
Well, he's been a disappointment. There's no question about that. And he campaigned on all the things we wanted to hear, but then all politicians do. It doesn't look like he's doing all that much against the deep state. It looks to me like he's assembling a war cabinet, especially with him picking John Bolton to be the national security advisor. He's loading up basically to take this nation into war, and we should all be very, very afraid.
Yeah, I got a little bit of advice about that. I think John Bolton needs some more information about Iran. And I'm clear how to think that he self reconnaissance plane might fly it over Iran and drop him out with a free fall parachute. And he can go in there and do some reconnaissance about, for the country and check out their defenses and all that sort of thing before he takes over.
Well, my attitude is if John Bolton wants war with Iran, we give him a rifle, a parachute, and a Dayglow jumpsuit left over from the CIA torture prisons, and we parachute him in there, and then we call Tehran and say, John is coming to whip your butt all by himself. Have fun.
Okay, Mike, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to take Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Mike. I got a new slogan here, real quick. What the Fukushima damn hell's going on, Alfie? Remember that expression? I thought you might get a kick out of that.
Yeah, I get a kick out of that one. I still like Keep RBN Alive, Tell 5, and I need you all to remember and repeat that one.
Okay. Hey, all debt is contractual, right? All debt is based on a valid or presumed valid contract.
Yes.
And for it to be valid and not just presumed valid, there has to be full disclosure in good faith, no deliberate nor inadvertent concealment of the attaching provisions of the contract.
Yes.
Okay. And then based on that, Mike, we provide our informed consent authorization pursuant to full disclosure. Well, okay, so there's this Boucher v. Sinar Supreme Court case, 1986. Boucher, that's Bow, B-O-W-S-H-E-R, Boucher v. Sinar, S-Y-N-A-R. And they ruled that when Congress has a charter-mandated fiduciary duty obligation, they cannot delegate that away to another entity. So the Federal Reserve, as you said, is a private corporation.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why everybody's saying the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The Constitution gave the money creation authority to Congress and does not allow them to delegate it. Anyway, we got to take a break for a commercial here. Fred, thanks for the phone call. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, and that is James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. About an hour after I called in last Friday, I found myself having what was described to me as a massive heart attack.
Ooh.
So I'm going to be looking into Extendivite. Now, compared to the rest of my family, every single one of them has had either stents or open heart surgery long before me. Fortunately, it wasn't open heart in this case, but I put this down to a policy of avoiding doctors like the plague. I only use Western medicine for emergencies. You know, everybody else has taken all these pills, and they have a plethora of health problems, and I've just basically taken care of things myself.
Yes.
But, yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking into Extendivite, and I recommend that everybody else do that as well.
Well, so, please call back and let us know, how it helps, okay?
All right. Thank you very much for your good work, and keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show, which is only a few minutes here. I want to go on back to this RBN donation drive that involves the front sight firearms training, because Claire just made an excellent point. I keep saying if I lived in the Western U.S., I would definitely go for this deal myself. And to recap, for a one-time $500 donation, you will get a lifetime commander membership at the front sight firearms training. And it involves discounts on guns, discounts on ammunition, the training itself, of course. They're building a residence facility. You can stay there during your training. But you don't have to live in the West to take advantage of this, because as Claire points out, you could make the donation and then give the commander membership as a gift to somebody who is a Second Amendment supporter. And so that certainly widens the number of people who could basically get on in and help RBN survive and support the Second Amendment and support front sight firearms training. We can see the gun grabbing just going on all around us. So again, we need your help, and you can get that commander membership in the Front Sight Training Academy. And I've got their website linked to the top of whatreallyhappened.com. You ought to take a look at the video. It's very enlightening. They're teaching combat shooting skills, which I hope will not be necessary, but maybe. Meanwhile, over at Harvard Law School, there's a Professor Lawrence Tribe is teaching a class this semester on how Trump could be impeached and removed. And it's just insane what we're seeing here. And finally, our last story, Dr. Russell Blaylock, who's at Johns Hopkins, is out there saying there's another area to be concerned about with vaccinations, and that has to do with an adjuvant called squalene, which, if I recall correctly, was somehow tied in with the Gulf War syndrome that a lot of veterans had to deal with. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Keep RBN alive. Tell 5. Share what you learn here with everyone that you know. We have to keep pushing against the war party, or we're all going to be toast. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.